All right. So, good morning to some of you, good afternoon to most of you, and welcome to the biweekly RVC community webinar series. These are free sessions that are open to the community, always centering on topics of interest to founders, investors, mentors, really anyone working across the startup world. I'm Dave Harris. I'm the Director of Operations for Rockies Venture Club, or RVC, and I'm also the Managing Director of the Pandemic Impact Fund. I'll tell you a little bit more about both of those in a moment. But today's session, just want to share, we'll be talking about a game-changing partnership that's playing a pivotal role in helping to mitigate health threats and infectious diseases like what we've been dealing with the ongoing pandemic and pandemics of the future. This is a partnership I'm talking about between Johnson & Johnson Innovation and the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. BARDA is a part of the Office of the Assistant Secretary, which focuses on preparedness and response for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So we're lucky today to be joined by Rachel Rath, who's the director of the BARDA Alliance for Johnson & Johnson Innovation, based at JLabs in Washington, D.C. She's going to share more about this alliance and their focused effort, which is known as Blue Knight, and how entrepreneurs in the audience or investors can point companies towards applying and how to get involved and utilize the resources that Blue Knight is providing. So as Rachel's going through today, you can feel free to drop questions into the chat window. I'll relay those to her and we'll have some time at the end to dive into Q&A. Before we do that and dive in with Rachel, just wanted to share a little bit more about RVC in case any of you are joining us for the first time. So RVC is a 200-person angel investor group based in Colorado. We're the longest running group in the country, and we are a nonprofit. We're doing a lot of different events throughout the year, about 140 year-round, and we're looking at a lot of early-stage investment opportunities. We look at about 1,500 deals across all different industries. Ultimately, as a group, we collaborate to invest in 25 to 30 annually, and mostly at the seed stage. We also have relationships with syndication partners across the country. Some of you are on the call, who we are collaborating with to share due diligence, share deals, and ultimately co-invest to support some great early stage companies. One way we're doing that, supporting these early stage companies, is through events like this one, the Angel Capital Summit, which is happening later this month on the 23rd and 24th. It's all virtual, but we've been running this event for the last 14 years. It's an opportunity to gather virtually, to learn about some exciting startups, hear from about 10 that will be presenting over 2 days, mixed with a number of panels and exciting networking opportunities. So we hope you can join us. We'll have companies from Colorado, but also from around the country. So a lot of different opportunities that you can see if you're an investor or an entrepreneur. And then, as mentioned, I'm also here on behalf of the Pandemic Impact Fund, which is launching this year and will be investing in 25 to 30 companies across its portfolio. One of the core focuses of this new fund that we're developing is around health security and the future of health, and how we can help to mitigate the current pandemic, but also pandemics of the future. So this ties very closely to the efforts that Blue Knight is focused on, which is our topic for today. And I want to invite in Rachel Rath, who again is the director of the BARDA Alliance for Johnson & Johnson Innovation at JLabs. Prior to joining JLabs, Rachel was the chief of staff at NEST-CC, which is the National Evaluation System for Health Technology Coordinating Center. Rachel, welcome. Thank you for making some time for us. Come onto the screen here. There you are. I'm going to stop my share so you can pull yours up. And again, while Rachel's going through, feel free to drop questions into the chat window and we'll relay those. And Rachel, thanks again for being here.
Let's see, Dave. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Sounds great. Looks
Perfect.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here today with the Rockies Venture Fund and with the Pandemic Impact Fund to tell you a little bit about Blue Knight, our collaboration between Johnson & Johnson Innovation, JLabs, and BARDA, as Dave said, which is part of the ASPR and part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, looking at how we can be better prepared for future health threats. What I'll do today is go through a little bit about Johnson & Johnson Innovation and our JLabs model, and then tell you a little bit about Blue Night. And what I hope you'll take away from today's discussion is really that there are many opportunities to engage with us, and we want to hear from startup companies who may be eligible to join Blue Night, but also from investors, from early stage innovators, from potential new collaborators and partners out there in the ecosystem. So thank you again for having me today, and I'll jump in with a little overview of Johnson & Johnson Innovation now. So Johnson & Johnson Innovation is really our external look at innovation happening in the ecosystem. It's really built on the premise that great innovation can come from anywhere. So what we've done is created a global network, and I'll show you here in just a couple of slides what this really looks like. So when we think about Johnson & Johnson Innovation, there are actually 4 different components to that. So first is the innovation centers. We also have JJDC, which is our internal ventures arm, JLabs, which is our incubator system, and then business development, which is where we look at later stage deals. This collaboration is really based within JLabs, but gives access to the whole Johnson & Johnson Innovation Network. As I mentioned, it is a global ecosystem, so you can see here how we span globally. The light blue are the JLabs locations, so you can see those in Asia, in Europe, in North America. We have 4 innovation centers, and those are really, can be thought of sort of as the front doors into the innovation ecosystem here. Those are based in Shanghai, London, Boston, and San Francisco, and they have global sort of reaches there. And Blue Night is actually based at JLabs at Washington, D.C. We can think of that as the hub location, but it does span globally. So while Johnson & Johnson has regional heads for JLabs locations, I have the privilege of having a global role and working what I consider more thematically with companies in areas of mutual interest that we'll talk a little bit more about later. The real root goal of JLabs is to help small companies get big company benefits. We want to make your lives as startup companies easier. We want to lower those barriers and obstacles to getting your science and technology to patients. So we do that through a no strings attached model. And it's really, I think, important to not think about JLabs as just a place. It's not just a physical place where you can take up residency, although we'll talk a little bit about the infrastructure. It really is joining a global community. So I'll talk now about some of those benefits for joining the JLabs ecosystem and what that looks like beyond just the physical space. But starting with the physical space, all of our JLabs locations around the world have wet labs, bio labs, and chem labs. They also have private offices. We provide operational management and equipment. So instead of, as a startup company, you having to provide these things for yourself, we take care of providing those sort of infrastructure components for you. We also have a resource hub. So this is where we work with sponsors who are looking to engage with the JLabs community around the world. So whether you're looking for some HR support, some legal support, marketing support, we have sponsors in our resource hub to help provide those services to you. We also have an investor hub, and we're thrilled that the Pandemic Impact Fund has actually joined us. And this is a connection of investors around the world that actually started in the Toronto region, bringing in investors excited to engage with JLabs companies. And it's really grown globally now. So we have meetings with these investor groups, both on-site and virtually, over the course of the year. We also offer programming. So like everyone else, we've pivoted to virtual programming over the last year. So traditionally, these programs take place in person at JLab sites around the world on roughly a monthly or twice a month cadence. In the virtual environment, a benefit is actually that this programming is now available to anyone around the world. So you can go to our website, see those programs. We have scientific programs. We also have more company acceleration programs. We have meet with opportunities, which are one-on-one meetings after sort of a introduction to an investor or a potential collaborator. When we're on site, some of these are also a little bit more get to know you or casual, so we can really build that collaborative environment as well. One of the things we really enjoy is getting to help highlight the work of the companies in our portfolio. So We do this through engagements throughout the year, through social promotion. Our job is to help tell your story so that you are getting attention in the marketplace. Lastly, one of the things that I think is really exciting is that every company that comes into Johnson & Johnson actually gets a JPAL, which is a mentor within Johnson & Johnson. So that person becomes sort of your champion within the organization. And these roles really vary quite a bit. If it's research and development mentorship you need, if it's marketing mentorship, if it's business plan development, it really is based on your needs. And often we bring multiple people together to fill this role for a company too. So I think that's a really unique component of JLabs and helps drive our companies to success. As I mentioned early on, JLabs is a no strings attached model. And when we say that, we mean that. So our companies come into Johnson & Johnson, we don't own any of the IP, we don't have any first rights. That all stays with the companies. Now, we may go on to do a deal with the company. In fact, we bring in companies that are strategically aligned because we hope there may be potential for collaboration in the future. But it's not part of coming into JLabs necessarily. It's not required. Companies, as you can see here, go on and do deals with a range of companies, including our competitors. One of the facts that we're very proud of is that 82% of the companies are still in business that have been through JLabs or have been acquired. And what is that 82% of, right? So we have 700 plus companies in our global portfolio worldwide in the areas where we work, so pharmaceutical, medical device, consumer, and then cross-sector as well. I did mention that we bring in companies to JLabs that are strategically aligned. We can best support companies when we have expertise in that area. So just to give you a snapshot, it's very high level, of course, but areas of interest that we work in: pharmaceuticals, medical device, consumer health, and then cross-sector. Now we're going to actually flip gears a little bit and talk about Blue Knight. And that's actually peeling back the layer a little bit more from just our broad areas of interest to looking a little bit more focused on some areas of interest for Blue Knight. So what is Blue Knight? Blue Knight is a collaboration that was initially announced back in April of 2019, that with the opening of JLabs at Washington, D.C., we would have this partnership with BARDA. We announced Blue Knight formally last August. And what you can really do is think about Blue Knight existing at the intersection between BARDA and Johnson & Johnson Innovation. So here you see visually represented that shield at the center of that Venn diagram. And this is our effort to sort of look at those mutual areas of interest and say, how can we help advance areas of health security, advance preparedness for the next global health threat, for the next pandemic? So we do this through two main pillars. First is by providing residency opportunities within JLabs locations. And the second is through programming and symposia throughout the course of the year. I went through many of those benefits of joining the JLabs community. So one thing I think is really important to emphasize is that if you apply and become a Blue Knight company, you're a JLabs company. Part of being Blue Knight is sort of a subsection within JLabs. And so currently we offer Blue Knight residency at 4 of our JLabs locations: Washington, D.C., which is the hub for the collaboration, New York City, San Diego, Toronto. And we also offer virtual residency. So if you're not physically near one of those JLabs locations, or maybe you don't need physical residency, maybe that's not the best way that we can support you, then we also have virtual residency as an option. And what are some of those unique benefits for joining through Blue Knight? So 2 that are relevant very much for physical and virtual residency are you get fee assistance. So instead of paying a license fee directly to JLabs, there's fee assistance to access the JLabs community and become part of JLabs. In addition to the mentorship you get from Johnson & Johnson, you actually also get a dedicated mentor from BARDA. So we think about that as providing sort of the dual perspective. So while Johnson & Johnson provides that commercial perspective, BARDA really provides that preparedness perspective on mentoring and provides another champion for your organization. If you are interested in physical residency, that fee assistance also provides access to physical space. And we work with all of our companies when you apply to say, what is the best space for you? If you're a digital health company, Maybe you don't need a footprint in a biolab. Maybe you're just looking for office space, for example. Or maybe you're not interested in office space, but you do need lab space. So we work with you to design that footprint that's the best fit. And lastly, there's also access to dedicated equipment for Blue Knight companies at select locations. So the dedicated equipment is available at JLabs at Washington, D.C. As I mentioned, that's our hub. And we've really designed this dedicated footprint with equipment to meet 3 different needs. So the equipment is sort of there to have a functioning lab, right? So your basic lab equipment, I would say, is there. Second, there is unique equipment that would otherwise not be on site at JLabs. And then lastly, equipment that can traditionally be of very high demand. So specialty equipment that in JLabs you may have to wait for, we've provided dedicated access to Blue Knight companies here. In addition to residency, we do programming throughout the year. So in 2020, we did 15 programs. We had about 2,000 attendees. And we feature our companies in many of those. So we do that through pitch style competitions, speaking opportunities, webinars. We co-author blogs with them, again, really to help provide exposure to those companies. And the programs really are geared both to provide guidance and acceleration opportunities to our companies, but also to help provide a spotlight sort of on scientific areas of interest. So for example, last week we had a really engaging program on alternative delivery methods for vaccines and therapeutics, where we talked really about nasal delivery, oral delivery, and patch delivery for vaccines and therapeutics as we think about where we're going in the future. We also convene a symposium each year. So we convened virtually, of course, last December. You can see a snapshot of sort of what our platform looks like here on the side. And we thought about the symposium this year really in a couple different ways, but as a way to think about lessons learned from the past and from our experiences today to how we can really accelerate innovation in the future. We also highlighted some of those key areas of scientific interest for us. So for example, we highlighted our interest in combating bacterial pathogens and in data science technologies and in diagnostics. To give you a snapshot of our companies today, we have 10 companies in the Blue Knight portfolio today that are located around the world. They range quite a bit. So just as an example of some of the technologies, Acclinate is actually a clinical trial platform that focuses both on engagement and education for clinical trials focusing on diversity and inclusion. We're really excited to welcome them. They're actually a new company into JLabs. Gabby Smart Care, for example, is a wearable technology. So we do range quite a bit. Lab 11, for example, is developing broad spectrum antivirals. So again, quite a range of technologies where MPOD is working on a point of care diagnostic. So we review applications on a rolling basis. And to just highlight a few of our areas of interest today, again, I already mentioned alternative vaccine and drug administration technologies. Also rapid screening platforms of high interest, generally therapeutic and vaccine platform technologies, and then again, ways to combat bacterial pathogens as we move into the future. So what does it actually look like? How do you do this, right? So in order to apply for Blue Knight, you apply through the JLabs application process. So it is very evident on our website. It's in the upper right-hand corner. You can also get there from the Blue Knight webpage. We ask you only submit non-confidential information in your application. The applications are looking for credible science, strategic alignment, meeting an unmet need currently. And then we do look at the team and the financial solvency, really just to see the strength of the team, the potential to move forward. The applications are reviewed internally at Johnson & Johnson. And then for Blue Knight applications, BARDA does provide input on those applications as well. So it's a great opportunity to have your science, have your technologies reviewed both internally at J&J and with BARDA. And then lastly, I'd encourage you to stay connected. So you can always subscribe with us for updates. You can email me directly. You can visit our website. We do actually have a program coming up in early April. That's a Blue Knight program looking at contract manufacturing. So just an example sort of a, I would say more of a company acceleration program that we're looking at. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to you, Dave. I can stop sharing my slides and we can have a discussion.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rachel. That was great. Appreciate that overview. So yeah, I do have a number of questions that have come through on Blue Knight, some just on JLabs. Want to again encourage folks, if you want to drop into the chat, I'll be sure to relay those to Rachel. Rachel, maybe just to start, in thinking about timing in terms of stage for companies that might be interested to apply to work with Blue Knight, could you share more about what's ideal, or as far as development? I know each company is a bit different, but maybe give us a sense of how much traction you want to see them achieve to date, if they've received funding, SBIR dollars, et cetera.
It's a great question and one that we get fairly frequently. So I would first say, don't ever be shy to reach out regardless of the stage of development that you're at. We really do see applications from concept all the way when they're in clinical development already. So we really do see a range across technology readiness levels. We do, however, typically like to see some proof of concept data when an application comes in. It's not necessarily required, but we do like to see some evidence beyond just the concept you're putting forward, but some data to support where you think that's going. In terms of funding, wonderful if you've received something like an SBIR grant. We do ask about that so we can see where you're starting to get traction in the ecosystem. For Blue Knight, one thing I would call out is that BARDA has technology readiness levels that they put forward in their funding application, in their broad agency announcement, and in their EZBAA. And typically what we see is that they're looking for technology readiness levels that are a little bit higher, more advanced. And through Blue Knight, they actually have an opportunity to look earlier in the pipeline. So if you have applied to BARDA before, maybe you've heard, yes, you're aligned, but you're too early in development. That actually may be a great sign for you of, come over to Blue Knight, let us work with you, take a look at your technology so we can help you get to a point of being ready for broad agency dollars from BARDA.
Okay, gotcha. That's helpful. And then I'm curious, for the entrepreneurs or even the investors on the call with portfolio companies that might be thinking about Blue Knight, how important is it that their solution fits into the traditional healthcare setting? Is that something that's a requirement? Or are you looking actually the opposite? I mean, how does that fit into your selection criteria?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think that gets to sort of the unmet need, or I think, particularly over the last year, we've seen a real unmet need in how do we bring healthcare actually out of the traditional healthcare environment? How do we bring healthcare into the hands of the end user, being the consumer, you and me? How do we actually have more access to these? So I think diagnostics is actually a really great example of where we're looking particularly at diagnostic companies of interest that are really easy to use, inexpensive, point of care, geared to that end user, where you're not talking about multiple components in a system where you're sending away samples, but really something that could be used in a home environment. So I wouldn't say we're across the board looking for things out of the healthcare environment, but I would say we're looking for things that can accelerate preparedness in the future. And if there's technologies that can be used by an end user in their home or in distributed care settings, that can help us as we think about a more rapid response in the future. Okay,
well said. All right, and then a couple questions, just going back to this application process. So Matthew had a question just in the chat. Does Blue Knight provide pre-application advice to judge application technology goodness of fit? I will translate that as a good fit for the program.
Yeah, so absolutely. I would, first of all, I would say I would tell people not to be scared of the application. It's really not a burdensome application, which I would encourage people to go take a look. You can see it online. It's pretty brief, to be honest, particularly when you're talking about only non-confidential information. But we actually really do like to engage with companies and interested parties before they put in their application. We can help shape it. One thing I would say in general, maybe as a piece of advice for Blue Knight applicants, is we see companies really leaning in to share information on just their preparedness solution. In many instances, we've seen companies pivot to address COVID-19 over the last year. But in the instance of a company developing a technology that's not just applicable to COVID-19, or maybe not even just applicable to pandemic preparedness, we really do like to see that whole snapshot of the company at the time of application, because maybe there isn't alignment, for example, with a platform approach internally in our infectious disease team, but maybe there is for that platform technology with our oncology team, for example. So the more information you can share with us, the better we can help support you. And we do like to provide that information early, even before application. So feel free, you can reach out to me directly. There is also a link, and Dave, I can send this to you after, where you can submit more of a informal meeting request versus submitting the full application.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll just drop in the chat now so you have the link to learn more about Blue Knight, but we'll be sure to relay that hyper application that Rachel's talking about with everybody that registered. Along with that,
I will
Rachel,
actually go ahead and drop the link into the chat right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
While you're doing that, we've had a number of people request a copy of the slides. Is that okay if we share that with folks?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that we will share after today's webinar with everybody that registered. And there's the link to meet with Blue Knight. So just taking a step towards the investor side, since we've got a number of investors on the call, maybe this is more just JLabs, but I saw in one of the slides you mentioned one of the benefits is this funding series that JLabs provides. What does that involve, and how can both the investors on the call get involved in that? And then what does that involve for the entrepreneurs that are part of JLabs?
So in terms of working with the investors, it's a little bit regionally focused, to be honest. So each region will engage with the investors. Some investors are really regionally focused. So some investors will sort of tie themselves almost to a JLab. Plenty of investors, I would say, pre-COVID, would do office hours even at a JLab site. We have an investor hub, which is a physical space actually in each JLab location. I saw ours for Washington, D.C. earlier this week when I was on site. So it's a dedicated spot really to meeting with investors. In terms of funding series, so we do have JJDC, and JJDC does occasionally partner with our investor partners as well. So that's something that if you're an investor, reach out. I'm happy to help make connections over to JJDC. That's something they occasionally participate in. But one of the things that we do is when investors have upcoming series, we'll do what's called a meet with event. And we can gear those really towards the needs of the investor. So our Meet With series, it looks like a JLabs program, and it is a JLabs program, but it's designed to meet the needs of the investor. So for an example, if you're an investor looking specifically to look at, let's just use oncology as an example, companies working in the space of oncology, we can do a program where you sort of give a pitch. Maybe it's a dialogue with someone from internally from J&J. Maybe there are other stakeholders on the panel as well. But then we ask companies to apply to meet with you, and we can set criteria. What are you specifically looking for? Are there specific milestones you'd look to have a company hit? So you can see that, you can review those applications. We can help you review those. We can make recommendations and then help schedule those one-on-one meetings for you. So you really have access to either the JLabs community, or they can be public events as well. Our goal is to help really spur investment and innovation into the ecosystem.
Okay. So one avenue might lead to the other. So you don't have to necessarily,
Yeah.
And then going the other way. So those 10 companies you mentioned that are in the Blue Knight portfolio, did those start through the JLabs accelerator? Were they at any of the JLabs facilities first before they moved into Blue Knight?
There's a mix, actually. So last August, as we were getting ready to announce Blue Knight, we, like many other companies, pivoted in response to COVID-19. And as we were getting ready to launch Blue Knight, we were looking across our JLab sites around the world and seeing many of our companies pivot in the face of the pandemic to switch their platforms, switch where they were going, and help contribute to combating this current pandemic. So we did do an initial set of, our inaugural class, so to speak, of Blue Knight companies came from within existing JLabs locations. But as I mentioned, we're reviewing applications for Blue Knight on a rolling basis. So a number of them have been new applicants that came into JLabs through Blue Knight over the last year.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, just thinking about geography for the folks that do need or are interested in some of the physical space, the wet labs, et cetera. What if you're based here in Colorado? We have folks on the call from all over the country, but, RVC and the Pandemic Impact Fund both based in Colorado. What are you recommending to folks that might be based here to get involved with some of the physical space?
So unfortunately, we don't have a physical location in Colorado, although it's a beautiful state and I'd love an excuse to visit more often. So, at this point, I would say we do have companies, to be honest, that maybe are based somewhere else and end up having a footprint in a JLabs location. For example, was working with a company just in the last couple of weeks. They were founded and based in Minnesota. They wanted to join JLabs at a physical location. They ended up actually setting up a footprint in JLabs San Diego, hiring some more staff from that area where there's regional expertise, great talent pool. The company is still based in Minnesota. They actually maintain many of their business operations there, but set up their lab work in San Diego, for example. That's an option. When we think about where we've set up JLabs locations, they're really based around what we would consider many of the innovation hotbeds, of course, not all of them, but where there may be great talent pools as you're looking to expand your team and your network there. Another option is to join us through the virtual model. And even if we can't provide that physical space for you then, but you can join the community, you can participate in all of our activities virtually. And then if you happen to be, in one of our sites, we can talk about, the opportunities. If you happen to be in Washington, D.C., can you access the space or so for a day while you're a virtual company? But you may need your physical space, frankly, somewhere else, but you can have your physical operations set up in another incubator, in another lab, and still participate with us virtually if a physical option's not there.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to, just on behalf of the state, throw our hat in the ring to be able to have a JLab site here. Matthew is also asking in the chat, any plans to set up a JLab site in the Midwest anywhere? I don't know if you can share that or not, but.
Great question. I would say our current site that we're working on is Washington, D.C. So that is the next planned JLabs location. That site has been under construction for just about 2 years now, and we're really thrilled that we'll be welcoming companies in just under a month actually into that JLabs location. So that is our current plan for JLabs' next site opening.
Okay.
But we always take suggestions for new great cities.
Sure. Yeah. And then let's see, going back to the chat, Alan had a question. Does Blue Knight or JLabs for that matter coordinate efforts with EU Pearl? If you're familiar with that, the patient-centric clinical trial platforms based in the EU?
I will say that I don't know how much we do, to be honest, but I'm happy if there are questions around that. I'm happy to actually take that more to the EU colleagues. I would expect probably that more of my colleagues in the JLabs European region have probably those connections and collaborate there. I mean, we are in these roles because we love building connections. That both is true for internally at JLabs, internally at J&J with our formal partners like BARDA, but also externally as well. So wherever we can help make connections is really what we love to do.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Just so you know, I know your organization is huge. I've been working with Daniel Miller out of Janssen, one of your subdivisions on EU Pearl. So thank you.
Okay.
And for everyone who's also interested, we do have an existing lab that is operable in Boulder, Colorado, and we have room for growth.
All right. Thanks.
There you go. You can go to Boulder, Colorado for physical residency and join us virtually at the same time.
There you go. So, and then Rachel, I'm really curious, about this relationship with BARDA that you're really in charge of for J&J Innovation. And so maybe this is more on the BARDA side, but is there any conflict with if some of the companies on the call, I know we have some in our portfolio that have received funding previously or contracts from other government agencies. Any issue there, or is that, do you see that this is complementary to, say, like the DoD?
Yeah, so great question. It's not a conflict. Many of our companies in our portfolio are actively going after federal dollars, even BARDA dollars, or have before. So it's not a conflict, and we're happy to even sort of help, again, make those connections. We do even bring in speakers from federal organizations, NIH, SBIR, to participate in our programs and help build those connections with JLabs companies. So absolutely not a conflict to apply separately to BARDA either. Absolutely not a conflict.
Okay, good to know. All right, and again, want to encourage folks, if you got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. One that came through was about the JLabs Navigator. I don't know if you'd share about that, but is that, what is that providing, and who should really be looking there in terms of access to the 700 some companies at JLabs?
Yeah, so the JLabs Navigator is sort of our public directory, I would say, of JLabs companies. So you can find it very easily on our website, and it will give you sort of basic information, the problem they're trying to address, their proposed solution, where they're located, who to contact in some instances. They'll even choose to put their contact there, the name of the CEO, key terms. So it really does provide a snapshot of the portfolio. You can search by keyword, you can search by region, you can look by therapeutic area. So it's a wonderful snapshot if you're looking to invest, if you're an investor looking sort of for potential company targets. I'd say Navigator is a great place to start. You're also welcome to reach out to me, submit an inquiry to the general JLabs inbox. We're happy to sort of give suggestions for keywords, or so to speak, as well. But great place to start for a snapshot, both of our current companies and then of alumni as well. So if you're looking for later stage companies, you may potentially want to look at our alumni, although I'd say, we have current residents at all stages as well, but there's some, filters that you can try to navigate.
Okay, thanks. And just dropped in the chat a link to that Navigator page that Rachel was just talking about.
You seem to have all the links right at the top of your hand.
Yeah, I'm on top of it. So one other thing that I thought would be helpful, and I'm not sure that you touched on this in your slides, but could you tell us more about the quick fire challenges and how that might be a way for folks to get engaged?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't touch on that in my slides. I think there was one that mentioned the number of quick fires we've done. So quick fires are a unique program within JLabs, and they're really a wonderful way to get involved. So typically they're addressing a particular challenge in the ecosystem that may have been raised by an external stakeholder. Maybe it came from an internal stakeholder, but we partner with either, again, someone internally, someone externally. And it's a prize competition, essentially, where you can become an awardee. As part of that, when you become a quickfire awardee, you can either win, JLabs residency, either virtual or physical. You can also win funding. And sometimes there are other unique sort of components that they add into those prize opportunities as well. But yeah, they're a wonderful opportunity. The applications usually open for about 4 to 6 weeks. So you can subscribe to our mailing list to see those. A challenge will open. Honestly, we seem to have a lot going on right now in terms of quickfires. So there's a number opening over the last couple of weeks, and that will be coming up. But that will open. It's about 4 weeks. You submit, again, all non-confidential information in that application. And then as the review process goes on, if you're selected for the final round, you're invited to basically present in a pitch competition to a final round of judges. And from there, a number of awardees are selected. It depends on the quickfire competition, how many awardees are selected for each one. We did a diversity and inclusion quickfire last fall that I believe gave 3 awardees. We had a DC regionally based quickfire also last fall, which I think had 5 awardees. So they're regionally focused, they're thematic. They really span a whole range of topics. So I'd encourage you to check those out. It's a great way to sort of get engaged with the JLabs ecosystem. Okay,
cool. And I should have had that link ready to go. I dropped the ball on that one, but I'll find that for you.
So it's on the JLabs homepage.
Yeah, just go there, play around. There's a lot of good information there for everybody. We do have some more time for questions. So again, feel free to drop those in. And I'm curious from really the Blue Knight perspective, you talk sort of high level about some of the categories that really are good fit for Blue Knight. Obviously, amid this current pandemic, there's categories that really, I think everybody's prioritizing, but is there any area that Blue Knight is really sort of seeing a gap in the market that maybe you're not seeing enough applications come through around that particular initiative that you could share?
Oh, that's a great question. Where would I love to see more applications come in? Honestly, we'd really love to see, I think, more applications come in the space of combating bacterial pathogens, things that are really novel, innovative solutions to some of the manufacturing challenges we face as well. I would say is another area. So a little bit different maybe than some of the ones I put on the slide, which are some of our more thematic, really high priority ones. But I would say manufacturing innovation is an area where we'd love to see innovations in modeling, in vivo and in vitro modeling, new technologies there as well. Those are maybe a couple areas I'd frankly love to personally see some more applications in.
Okay. All right. So make sure that anybody in the call that has those companies in their network, make sure that they get in to apply. Okay. And then, let's see, I got a question in from the chat from Sue. So do you work with other agencies than BARDA, such as DARPA or the National Science Foundation, NSF?
So we do, I would say, have ongoing dialogues with them, and we do have we don't have a dedicated relationship like we do, frankly, with Blue Knight with those agencies, but we're continuously collaborating, I'd say, particularly with NSF. And many of our companies are exploring opportunities, I would say, with DARPA in addition to BARDA.
Yeah.
Seems to be a lot of overlap there as well. And when we're thinking about, setting the stage for where we want to see innovation going, of course, DARPA is right out there, really setting cutting edge innovation moving forward. So we don't have a formal relationship with them like we do with BARDA, but we do engage with them.
Okay. Yeah. So no conflicts. Apply freely. And what if somebody, say, applies and doesn't make it right now? Are you considering, wait 6 months and reapply? What do you recommend to folks that maybe are too early or not just a fit just yet for Blue Knight?
Yeah, so yes, you absolutely are welcome to reapply. I would say if you have applied in the past and not get accepted previously, my recommendation would be to really reach out, maybe use that meet with form, have a conversation with us prior to resubmitting your application. Maybe there were gaps that you can more readily address now. Maybe there have been major advancements in milestones, but we can help talk about maybe how to get over some of those challenges from your first application to either see if you were too early, do you have the data now that would be helpful, or maybe it's a couple months out still. So I would say if you're absolutely welcome to reapply. My advice would be it's probably helpful to have a conversation with us first so we can help you best position yourself.
Okay. And so again, that link that we submitted earlier, I think this one, Beat with Blue Knight, is probably the best way to first get engaged. Test
or
the
my email will be in the slide.
Okay, great. All right. And then, I just had a couple more. First, just around JLabs. What's the interaction like between JLabs companies? You mentioned 700. Are there, obviously they're doing programs together, but is there integration happening, partnerships happening within JLabs that you all are helping to facilitate? And, maybe an example of one if you can share.
Yeah, so I think it happens both sort of formally and informally. Informally, I'd say one of our Blue Knight companies, even at the start of the pandemic, was at the JLabs location and actually literally in the kitchen near the coffee machine, sort of brainstorming about how they wanted to pivot, seeing if they could help provide a solution as we moved into the pandemic. And it was another company there that they were sitting there brainstorming with and helped provide some critical information so that they could, in fact, make that pivot and sort of adjust their technology to be relevant for COVID-19. So really informal, literally in the kitchen through a relationship that they had. We also have a online community for our JLabs companies. It's actually in the process of getting updated and becoming even more of sort of that virtual hub for interactions, but that exists for all of our companies, both with sort of regional forums, but also with interest areas. So if you're interested in infectious disease or oncology, you can have sort of be part of those virtual groups, but you can also be part of your regional group. We do have a Blue Night group as well, sort of for example, so that virtual community. We also have some more formal things. So for example, that most of the regions have, a quarterly or even more frequent than that, just CEO roundtable, where just they're connecting with the CEOs of those companies. Some of the regions have more of like a hang out with the site head for lunch type opportunity. So they have sort of those routine points, even in this virtual world, of coming together and building those connections. And we have seen some collaborations between JLabs companies cross sites. They're always interested in sharing information and considering partnering together as well.
Cool. All right. So, I always like to end these things on sort of a positive note. And amid everything that's happening, I'm curious because you're sitting at this really unique cross section with, this partnership with BARDA and of course J&J. What are you seeing from all this innovation globally? What are you seeing that gives you some hope that we're going to get past this pandemic soon and hopefully be able to mitigate pandemics in the future?
I think one of the things that really gives me hope is the number of companies that we've seen over the last year who'd maybe never before thought about working in emerging infectious diseases or in pandemic preparedness say, oh, wait, my technology can help, and think about how to pivot into that space and want to be part of these global solutions. I think that's been really inspiring. And, when we think about wanting to have multiple shots on goal and wanting to support multiple companies and overcoming some of these really big challenges, it's been inspiring to see how many companies have really stepped up and said that they want to take part in helping sort of mitigate the pain that we're feeling worldwide. So that's been really inspiring to me. And I hope that when we're out of the current crisis, some of that momentum continues, so that we don't sort of fall back into more complacency, but we really keep driving forward. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that we will.
Okay, me too. It's a good answer. All right. Well, Rachel, I want to thank you again. This was really informative and helpful. I'm going to drop more things in the chat for everybody, including Rachel's contact information. And then again, this is the best link to actually reach out to Blue Night and just kind of get a feeler to see if you're maybe the right fit or one of the companies in your portfolio or network might be as well. So again, thanks to Rachel Rath for joining us. And I want to remind everybody that our VC is hosting the Angel Capital Summit later this month, where you'll be hearing from all kinds of different companies, but certainly some around the healthcare sector. And you can learn more about the Pandemic Impact Fund at pandemicimpactfund.com, which will be investing in a lot of the areas that Rachel mentioned today later this year. So thank you all again. Thank you, Rachel. I hope everybody stays well and have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you so much, Dave.